welcome to another tutorial video. I haven't got a finished card for you today, but it's going to be a technique showing you this really cool kind of background. I've done a couple of different versions. You can do it with any stencil that you have. These are some really old CRaFTi ones from literally like 5 years ago. But I don't really have that many Christmassy stencils, but they're just a couple of the ones that I did have that I thought I'd show you this technique with. And this is that kind of technique where you emboss your stencil into your card, and then we're going to add colour with Distress Oxides. Then we're going to put the stencil back onto the card and use some gilding polishes. So we've got a Lustre polish and a regular gilding polish as well to use to make like a variation of colour back over the top. And then this was just all of my leftover polish, because I had put some out on my mat and was using it with a sponge, so I had a little bit left over. So you can get another background out of this as well if you want to, depending on how much polish you put out onto your desk. So to start off with this technique, we want to emboss our stencils onto a piece of card. So to emboss your stencils, you want to use a different sandwich to your normal cutting sandwich, and you want to use your embossing plate and your tan mat instead of your cutting plate. So if you were using the full-size plates from the Tangerine, these are both the green mats. You've got the green hard plate and then the green squidgy mat as well. And what you want to do is you want to put your mat down, then you want to put your card down, and then you want to put your stencil on top of that. And then this should, hopefully, the squidgy mat should like help push the card up, and then we're also pushing the stencil down. So we should get an embossed pattern or a debossed version of the stencil into our cardstock. Sometimes you might have to add an extra shim, but usually this sandwich works for your cardstock, because your stencils, you're never going to get like a really deep emboss like you would with an embossing folder. It just gives a really subtle kind of emboss. So now we've got that beautiful kind of ivy pattern onto our piece of card. And then I want to do the poinsettia one as well, because I might as well show you it a couple of times. And it doesn't seem to matter how intricate your design is, because we are embossing it, but then we're also going to put like paste or polish through the stencil as well. So it might not get into all of these finest details on the finished design. You can see some of the centres of the poinsettias are missing, but we have been able to get it into some of the bits of the poinsettia. So I don't think it really matters if you have got really intricate details, because I don't think you're really going to miss it that much in the final result, especially if you've got something over the top of it. So we'll run that one through as well. So we've got our gorgeous poinsettias on there as well. You can see it has embossed the tiny detail as well. It just hasn't, like when you use your paste and stuff through it, you just might not get all of that detail back through, but it does actually emboss it with the stencil. Then the next step is to do your ink blending on your pieces of card. So I wanted to show this. You know the Easy Grip mat from Tonic? Let me pick mine off of there. This is the Easy Grip mat from Tonic. I think it's just come back in stock as I'm filming these videos. But you can cut this down. It comes in a large sheet. It's 10.5 inches by 12 inches, but you can cut it down into smaller pieces. So what I have done is I've cut a piece here that is just smaller than my panels that I like to work with, and I've just sandwiched it between two pieces of acetate, and I keep it with a clip on a little peg next to me. But the reason why I've done that is because this is like sticky. It's going to stick to your surface, but also your card is going to stick to it as well, which means if it's sticky, anything is going to want to stick to it. So you kind of want to protect it when you're putting it elsewhere, but you can put your card on there and it's not going to move anywhere. So we can actually place that underneath our card whilst we ink blend, and it shouldn't budge around whilst we're ink blending on top of it, which is really nice. So I'm going to use Distress Oxides. I've got Cracked Pistachio, Twisted Citron, Mermaid Lagoon, and Blueprint Sketch as well. And we're going to go in like a random fashion. I'm using these small little blending brushes again, which I showed in a video recently, because I like the variation you can get. If you used one of the large Nuvo blending brushes, you tend to cover more area than maybe you were intending to, because they've got such a large surface area that they can cover. But for this one I wanted a lot of variation, because the actual stenciling is all the same colour. I wanted a nice lot of variation in the background, so I'm going to go with my little brushes, and I'm going to go with all 4 of these colours. And look, you don't even have to hold your cardstock. You can be blending with a little brush and not even have to hold your cardstock when you've got that grippy mat underneath there, which is quite handy. I had been a bit dubious about using it because I knew it was sticky, and I was like, I'm just going to get glitter and embossing powder all over it. But I found if you put it between the 2 sheets of acetate and then hang it up somewhere where you know where it is, it does keep it nice and clean, and you're not going to kind of lose it somewhere or get it stuck to something or get it covered in embossing powders and glitters and stuff. Because I've been using embossing powder a lot recently, as you've probably gathered from some of my Advent videos. So we're going in with cracked pistachio now in a few other areas. You can just go anywhere you like, really. You can make it a little bit more intentional where you put your colour, or you can just be completely random. Like, because as I'm talking, I'm not really concentrating on where I want to put the colour. I'm literally just placing it wherever I just put the brush down, really. Now the darker blues that we're using, the Mermaid, Lagoon and the Blueprint Sketch, are darker tones. So we might want to be a little bit lighter handed with these, and then come back in with some of those lighter colours to help blend them out a little bit more, rather than going in too heavy and then getting it really dark. But we can just go into any area that we feel like we want to add the colours to. Try and get like a nice balance of the colours across the background. And then we can use a little bit of that Blueprint Sketch, which is really dark. Not as dark as Chipped Sapphire, but much darker than the other tones that we were using. And we can just get that in all of the different areas. And that's not quite gripping it because I'm not pushing on the actual bit of the mat in this corner. Can add a little bit down here maybe. And then if you notice on this one, that Twisted Citron isn't like really noticeable. It's kind of more blended in. So how I did that was I just took the cracked pistachio and went back over the Twisted Citron areas. It helps blend in those darker colours, and it also mutes down that Twisted Citron a little bit, but it gives a different sort of tone of colour to the background than if you had just used the Twisted Citron. Sorry, if you just used the cracked pistachio by itself. So we'll just go over those areas just to sort of mute that Twisted Citron down a little bit. And then we can also come back in with a tiny bit more of the Mermaid Lagoon to help get a little bit smoother kind of blends on here. It doesn't matter too much if it's not a completely smooth blend, because the pattern, when we actually put the gilding polish back over the top, the pattern is going to disguise it a little bit more, and we're also going to do a little bit of water splatter on it as well. Okay, so that's the first background done. Then the other one I did do it randomly as well. So this one, to show you something a little bit different, so you're not just watching me do exactly the same thing, I'm going to do this in stripes, just to make it look a little bit different for you. So we're going to go Twisted Citron, and we'll do our stripes of that first, and we will come back over the cracked pistachio onto the Twisted Citron again. And we're just going in diagonals to create this stripy kind of pattern. It's going to be a blended stripy pattern, but it still looks nice though. And a little bit more. Then we're going to go cracked pistachio, and we go up against the Twisted Citron, and we might as well just go straight over the top now. And we can also sort of do it on both sides of the Twisted Citron. So we can sort of make a double cracked pistachio stripe either side of it. This would be a lot quicker if you were using your larger ink blending brushes, but you wouldn't be able to be quite so controlled as to where you're putting your colour. So if you would rather it would be larger patches of colour, or you just like the way you already ink blend, then go ahead and do it that way. it's just kind of showing you the technique of how you can emboss your stencil, then ink blend, and then come back with your stencil with something metallic over the top to add a pattern. Then we're going to go in with the Mermaid Lagoon, and we're going to do that on both sides here as well. We're getting a nice blend between the sort of cracked pistachio twisted citron mixture and the Mermaid Lagoon as well. You get a nice greeny, like a kind of a little bit of a foresty kind of colour. Just maybe just like a more bluey version of cracked pistachio, but it gives a nice tone anyway. Okay, and then finally some blueprint sketch. Okay, then we can blend the blueprint sketch just a little bit with the Mermaid Lagoon. And there we've got our stripy kind of background. It does look badly blended from where you're looking, but once we've done everything, we won't think that, I hope. We shouldn't think that, because we will kind of disguise it with the metallic gilding polish and a little bit of splatter on there as well with water. So that's our second background done. Now we want to put our little piece of grippy matte away and put it between our two sheets of acetate again, and then put a clip on it, hold it together, and that will keep it nice and clean for you. And then I've just been storing it on a clip where I keep all of my swatches for my alcohol pens. Okay, so to make sure our stencils stay in a good position on top, we're going to make sure we line them up first so that they are in line with our embossed detail. You can kind of feel that lock into position. And then I'm going to flip it over and just take a little bit of washi tape and secure this in place. If you wanted to, you could ink blend your background first and then washi tape your stencil to your card, emboss it, and then put your paste straight through it, or your metallic gilding polishes straight through it. I just liked doing it this way round, because if you wanted to, you could have been more specific with where you were adding the colour. Like for example, on the poinsettias, you could have gone in circular motions on top of the poinsettias to make the colour look like it's radiating out from them or something. So you can definitely be more intentional with where you're putting your different colours of ink as well. But we'll just get this one lined back up and flip it over and tape it into place. And then we're going to go in with our polishes. So I'm using a Lustre polish, which is Apple Fizz Lustre polish and Fern Green Gilding polish. I just thought they went quite nicely together and they'd go with this beautiful blue and green colour scheme. And I thought, why not mix a couple of them together? There's nothing to say you have to use all of one type of polish when you're doing these kind of techniques. So I'm going to scoop out a little bit of the Apple Fizz. And then I'm also going to scoop out a little bit of the Fern Green as well. We can wipe the excess of that onto our sponge ready. This is just a little bit of cut and dry foam. It's my preferred applicator for going through intricate stencils. If you were going through something that had larger details, I probably would go for a foam on one of the mini ink blending tools. But for this, I really want to get into as many of those details as I can. So I'm going to go with the cut and dry foam because I can like squish it intentionally in different areas rather than having the handle of the tool in the way. So I'm using the sponge for both colours. I'm going to go in with a little bit of the Apple Fizz first. And you can kind of pounce it on there, or you can go in a circular motion, whatever you feel works better for you, and whatever gives the kind of coverage that you want as well. Because sometimes with different polishes and mediums and stuff, if you go in a circular motion, you don't get as much coverage as you might want. If you pounce, you might get a heavier kind of coverage. And a Lustre polish is similar to a glacier paste or a lunar paste, but it has smaller particles of mica in there. So you know how with a glacier paste and a lunar paste, they have like larger flakes of mica in them, and it wants to sort of like lay down flat onto your glass mat like this. This has slightly smaller particles in it, and it's also in a nice sort of pot that has the sponge on top. You could use the sponge that comes on top of one of these metallic polishes. You get these sponges like this. However, I like to use these to run across the top of an embossing folder. So you could try doing that with this, you know, not putting the stencil back on top and you've got that embossed impression, and you could try rubbing over it. But because we did it with a stencil, we have the opportunity to use the stencil to get it in exactly the right places. But yeah, I like to use these on top of my embossing folder, so I don't want to use them in my stencils in case I rough up the edges of my sponge. I want to keep these nice for actually having them as a flat surface to do those kind of applications, or to cover an entire piece of card in the metallic gilding polishes, to turn them into like a metallic sort of cardstock. So that's why I tend to use a separate sponge with them. But you know, you can use your sponges that come with them if you want to, but that's just why I tend not to. And I've got a little piece of a die cut hiding in there. Oh, I'll just leave it now. It's a little waste piece from a die cut. Okay, let's just keep going, putting all of this on, mixing between the metallic gilding polish and the Apple Fizz Lustre polish as well. I like how this metallic polish kind of like deepens the colour of the Lustre polish as well. I think that works really nicely. It's nice mixing them together. You could also mix in an opal polish. That would look fantastic. I love their opal polishes because they have multiple colours in them. I especially love the opal blaze polishes that you get in the small little glass jars or in the touch tip applicators, because they've got so many colours in them. They're so beautiful. Okay, so I think pretty much got everywhere. You can try and squash the sponge as much as you want to try and get it into all of those fine little details as well, like those tiny little dots in the centre of the poinsettias of this stencil. And then we can remove the stencil to reveal our beautifully stenciled raised design, and I'll come back in a minute to polish this off once it's dry, but we can leave that to one side whilst we do the other one. And we're going to do exactly the same thing for this one. So we're going to take a mixture of both of the different polishes again and just pounce them or swirl them over the top, depending how we feel is working best for us. If you wanted to, you could use a brush to apply this as well. However, I'm too lazy to wash brushes out when I've used something like a medium in it. I feel like if I just use a small piece of cut and dry foam, I'm not going to be sad if I forget to wash it out and it goes hard and I can't use it again, although there is always ways of using it again. But you know, if it did become unusable, I wouldn't be sad, because like, you've got a whole massive 8x10 sheet of it and you can just cut another square off. Whereas if I use like a blending brush like this to apply it, I know I would forget to clean that. It would roll off somewhere and I'd totally forget to clean it, and then it would be hard to like resurrect it afterwards. So I just find that using something that you're not too precious about, like a little piece of cut and dry foam or a makeup sponge, or you know, something like that, is good for this sort of technique, because it also does get a little bit roughed up with the edges of the stencil, which is why I don't use the sponges that come in the actual polishes as well. So we can just go all over, almost finished. We can add a little bit of the darker colour anywhere we feel like it needs it. And this one's much easier for getting the details. There's not as many small details in this one. So now we can remove this stencil, and we've got our beautiful holly design as well. So I'll just clean this up and then I'll come back. Okay, so now we've got our stencil background. I can pick off that funny bit of die cut that got stuck under there. I did move this stencil a tiny bit, so it's a little bit off, but I don't think that really matters. And then now this has been sort of drying for a little bit, we can actually just take some dry kitchen roll and like polish it up a little bit, and it makes it even more of a beautiful shiny finish. And you can see how having that pattern on there is kind of disguising the background a little bit if you did have any really bad ink blending. And then another way to disguise any bad ink blending, or if you don't like the starkness of it, it doesn't quite look this stark in real life. This is a better blend between these two colours in real life. It just looks, I think maybe it's just the camera or the lights that I've got on, because it's like 8:30 in the evening at the moment. But another way to kind of disguise anything like this if you don't like it is to take some water, spray it on your mat, and then take your little paintbrush and do some little splatters on there. And we're actually going to do 2 rounds of splatters. So we're going to do 1 round of splatters. Actually, maybe we're going to do the first round with a bigger paintbrush. We'll go bigger paintbrush to get more water in your brush to make larger splatters. And we'll do that on both backgrounds, just flicking the water on to get splattering all over the background. And this will work with your Distress inks or your Distress oxides. And then, once that's sat for a little bit, you can dab off the excess. And then you can go back in with your smaller paintbrush to get some finer splatters and do it again, but this time we won't dab it off, we'll leave it, and it should bleach them even whiter than it does do when you sort of lift it off. I'll show you that on the dried backgrounds that I've got as well. But it's just a different kind of look, and it kind of blends the background a little bit more, adds a little bit more interest to it, disguises any bad sort of blended areas and stuff. And I always think it looks nice on a project. And if you're scared to splatter with something like something with mica in, something sparkly, a polish watered down, because you get it everywhere, if you splatter with water, it doesn't matter if it goes everywhere because it will just dry. So it's quite a good version of splattering because you don't have to worry about getting stuff everywhere. A little splatter of water on a couple of things won't hurt it. So we can leave those 2 now so that second round of splotches will kind of dry. But look at the beautiful shine on the polishes that we've got. So I'll leave those 2 to one side, and we'll just finish off these 2 that I've already got dried to show you the way I'm going to put them together and what I'm going to use on them. But you can kind of see in the background that difference that the little splatters sort of give, and you've got bigger splatters, smaller splatters. Some of them are less pulled up, less colour, some of them are pulled up more colour, just to give a nice little variation in the background. And I've done that on both of them again. So for all of the decorations for these cards, I've got enough to finish off 5 cards, even though we've only got 2 to finish off here. But I adore these Whimsy Stamp dragons. I think they're called Dudley. The set from this year, I haven't got it yet. I'm not sure if I'm going to get it. It's really cute. It's with baubles, but I have quite a few of them now, so I'm not sure if I should get it. But it's adorable as well, the newest one. But they're so sweet, these little dragons. They're just so adorable. I've used them in a few videos, I think, now. I love the Get Well Soon one as well. I love this one where he's tangled in all the fairy lights. And I've coloured that one here, and I also coloured this one as well for another card. And then I also bought these last year to use in my CRaFTi Advent series. And then I just completely ran out of time, and I ended up using a load of older videos that I already had filmed. So I had to bring this one out this year. I just love nutcrackers, and these ones actually look quite cute. And I love that they've got the walnuts in here as well, and the 2 little sprigs of holly too, and the sentiments are funny as well. So I've coloured and cut out a few of these images. Now my plan was I wanted to use the dragon on this card, and then I've got a few different layouts in mind for all of the nutcrackers, so we'll just go with one of them to finish off this one card. So I'm going to pick this little fella, and I'm going to put one of the little hollies on his hat. And I want to move him slightly further up because we're going to put a sentiment that goes all the way across the card. And then I want to give him a couple of the little walnuts, and then maybe a couple of extra holly sprigs. And you can also colour the little sword for him as well, and you can put it in whichever orientation you want. It's got his hand on there, so you can put it so he's holding it up, or you can put it on the other side so he's holding it down. So I think I'm going to put it like that. And then we're going to pick our sentiments. I also coloured this cute little one for one of the other cards. I was thinking maybe the green one, but I haven't cut him out. Maybe I'll cut him out and then we can finish that one as well. So for fussy cutting, someone asked the other day what I like to use for fussy cutting, and these are the scissors that I like to use. They're the Tim Holtz mini snips from Tonic. They do have a serration on one edge of the blade, and depending on how you hold that when you're cutting, you might get a serrated edge. But I found with all of the Tonic scissors that have the serrated blade, if you hold the Tonic logo away from what you're cutting, so when you're holding your scissors, your thumb is on this side and the logo is on the opposite side to your thumb. I find if you cut like that, you don't get the serrated edge so much. So it's really annoying because the serrated edge really helps you cut out your images, especially if you're cutting something like thick watercolour card or 300 GSM, like white card that you stamped your images onto. It helps so much having that serrated edge. If you try it out with a non-serrated pair of scissors and a serrated pair, you'll really see the difference. But it's just annoying that sometimes you get that serrated edge showing. I know not everybody can see it, but if I notice it, it kind of bugs me. So if you hold them at that with the label pointing outwards, it does kind of help with that serrated edge showing as well. So that's just a top tip. But they are fantastic for fussy cutting. I do really enjoy using them for fussy cutting. And the handles aren't too uncomfortable either. I mean, obviously they're going to dig into your hands like all handles of scissors, but they're more comfortable than the smaller kind of pairs of scissors with the small little handles. They've actually got a squishy handle on them, so they are a lot more comfortable for holding. Okay, so we're just going to wiggle across the bottom there as well. And then we've got him to go on that card, which I might want to bring something else in to go behind him. I'm not sure yet. I hadn't really decided how to finish this card off. But for these two, I've got all of my sentiments stamped out that I was thinking of using for all of the different cards. So I wanted to do Everyone Needs Christmas Cheer for this little fella. And then this one I was going to do Merriest Wishes, You're a Crazy Friend, because he does look like he's a little bit obsessed with Christmas, that little fella. And then for this one, I am going to do 3 Nutcracker cards. I'll finish the other 2 off camera. But we can do Have a Nutcracking Christmas, 'Tis the Season to be Nutty, and Wishing You a Cracking Christmas. I might go Wishing You a Cracking Christmas for this one. So because these are longer sentiments, I said this in my tutorial where I did a retro card with the Rubik's Cube on. Because this is a longer sentiment, I do like to use my trimmer to cut them, because I usually use my long bladed pair of scissors, but when it's a longer sentiment, it is much easier to get a crooked line if you actually use scissors to cut them out rather than using the paper trimmer. I just find for smaller things the scissors are much easier, but with the larger sentiments the trimmer is really good. So I'll show you, actually I'll cut this one out with the trimmer as well because it's slightly longer and I kind of want it to go across the card. But the other ones I'll cut out with my scissors and show you. So we've got Everyone Needs Christmas Cheer. I'll keep those for the other cards. Oh, I need the other one, don't I? And I'll get my long bladed pair of scissors. They're also Tonic scissors. And again, hold the logo away from the opposite side to your thumb when you're cutting to not get that serrated edge. I'll zoom you back in a little bit as well. So I literally just hold the sentiment, and if you kind of look where the blade is going, you tend to get a nice straight line. That's how I like to cut out my smaller sentiments. I just find it much easier than faffing around with your paper trimmer. I always get it wonky on a smaller one because you can't like hold it as firmly. So we can trim that. Okay, so let's move these back into shot. So we're going to do Wishing You a Cracking Christmas, and I'm going to have him standing on that, and then I'll nestle everything around, I think. And then we're also going to do this one with, because you've got those 2 strings coming off the top, you could put him right at the top of a card, or you could put him this way around and have your sentiment down here, or if you put them at the top of the card you can have your sentiment down the bottom. But I wanted to move him to more of the middle kind of section and have the sentiment going across the card to kind of be where he's hanging from. I thought that'd be a nice way of doing that. And then this one, I haven't 100% decided how I'm going to do this one, but I wanted to do like Merriest Wishes and then You're a Crazy Friend. He can kind of be sitting on that. And I might colour some bits of cards actually to make these stand out nicely, so they've got a little border behind them. So the way I like to do this is to use the same colours of pens. So I did keep them all to the side so I could show you. I was using Copics to colour all of these because they are my favourites, but those are all of the colours. If you want to take a screenshot, that's all of the colours I used to colour in the Nutcrackers and those two dragons. So if you did want to see which ones I used, but I coloured his hat blue because I was thinking I might put him in one of the blue backgrounds, but I haven't used any other blue other than on his little claws as well. So I'm going to use the blue colours to colour the pieces of card to go behind those sentiments. And then on this one, I've got red berries, so I'm going to use my red tones to colour a piece of card to go behind that one. And then this one, I didn't use any reds on this one. There's no red, it's just all blues and greens. So I'm going to use the darker blue, I think. So I'm going to use a mixture of those two to do the bit behind that. So, to do this, I'm going to take a piece of card that I know is just wider than what I need and use that to colour to go behind. You can do this with your polishes and stuff as well if you want to, depending on what kind of card you're doing. And then these little pieces here should be enough to go behind these two words as well. So we'll do that one there and then that one for here. So all I do to do this is just take your two bits of card, take your two colours. This is B05 and B06 is what I used to colour his hat in. And then I like to colour half of it in the lighter colour and then half of it in the darker colour and like blend them in the middle. And it just makes the perfect little matte layer to go with your sentiment. If you have the perfect colour of cardstock, then you can definitely use that. Or if you've paper pieced the hat or something, you could definitely use the same patterned paper to do that as well. Might need a tiny bit more ink on one end. And that should be big enough for that one, and that one's big enough for that one. Don't leave them on top whilst they're drying or evaporating, because they might evaporate funny and leave an actual impression of where that rectangle was sitting on top of it. I've done that before, and I've come back and I've been like, what on earth happened to this? And it's because I'd left a die cut resting on top of it. So the next one is using B26 and B29. And again, I'm going to go lighter colour towards the top, and then darker colour towards the bottom. And then blend in the middle. You don't really have to blend it, but I just tend to. And then that should be wide enough for the card if I want it to go all the way across, and it's perfect for that sentiment. And then the final one is going to be reds, and I'm using R27 and R29 because I know that's what I use to colour in the berries. I have got a re-inker for this one, it's drying out a little bit. Can you tell this is my favourite red one to use? I might just go with the darker colour for this so I don't have to re-ink it right now. Okay, so then we've got our little red strip as well. Okay, so now those have been drying for a little bit, just to make sure all the alcohol has evaporated, we can stick our little sentiments on top of them. And then, oops, I stuck that on the wrong one. That's supposed to be for the longer sentiment. Okay, we can put those on top. And this long one as well. And put that on top. I will cut these by hand, just cutting that small little edge, because otherwise you cut one side with the paper trimmer, you get it perfect. You try to cut the other side and then it's less or more than you wanted, and then you try to keep trimming at it and then it goes wonky. That's always what happens to me. So I tend to just go by hand for doing the little skinny edge pieces. I can usually tell by eye better than I can on the paper trimmer, but however you like to to do it and get your little mats and layers. Maybe you like to always die cut your sentiments, you can definitely do that as well. Okay, so we go that one on there. And then that one for there. And then I've got to concentrate and go straight all the way along here. I don't think it really matters if it is a little bit crooked when you've hand cut something, because it is a handmade card after all, so I don't think anybody's really going to notice. So we've got the red one for that card because it picks out the red of the holly berries. And then we're going to have the blue one for this card because I didn't put any red on this design. Okay, so we'll move those out of the way. I'll zoom you back out a little bit so we can see a little bit better. I'll start with this card and we're going to put the sentiment, I think all the way across the card is going to look nice because it makes it more purposeful having him hanging there. It kind of looks like that is some kind of banner or beam or something going across the top of the card and he's decided to get tangled in the lights that are hanging from it. And then to put all of this on, I'm going to use my low profile foam tape. So I like 1mm foam tape at the moment, so that's what I'm going to use. But whatever's your preferred depth of foam tape is perfect. Or if you're doing a lot of posting and you want them to be flatter, then you can definitely go with your double-sided tape or wet glue as well. I think 1mm profile is quite good for posting because a small letter in the UK with a normal postage stamp is like 5mm depth. So if you've only put one layer of 1mm, you should get away with having it in an envelope and it shouldn't be too fat to post on a small stamp. So we've got our tape on the back of there. Just tried to put small little bits to support some of the skinnier kind of areas. And just remove all of the backing pieces and then put him into position, making sure these are going straight up and down so it makes sense that he's hanging from them. And then we can use the same foam tape to just put that straight across there. And the way to do this to make sure you're not having to cut through foam tape on these end pieces is to cut it skinnier than you need it to be and then just actually place it across your card rather than on the back of your sentiment. And then you can trim off that excess piece there, take the backing off and then put this straight over the top. And then you can easily cut from the back and you're not trying to fight your way through some foam tape as well. And there you go. You've got your gorgeous little card. I really like that. And I've got some gems and stuff that we might put on afterwards as well, but I'll finish the other two first. So we'll go with the Nutcracker one next. Now this one, I want him to be standing on that sentiment, so I'm going to stick the sentiment on first. But I want to make sure, this is the tallest Nutcracker out of the three of them, I want to make sure he's still going to fit on there nicely with that sentiment across the bottom. So I'm going to take a long piece of foam tape, cut it a little bit skinnier than the actual sentiment strip itself, and then I can put that straight across the card. Cool, I eyeballed that really well. And then peel off the backing and then stick our sentiment on. You can use the grid lines on your mat to get it straight. I'm hoping I'm getting it straight. If I look up there I can see. It's quite good actually filming because you can look above and get like a proper bird's eye view and see if it's straight. So I think that's straight. And then we will put some foam tape on the back of all of our characters, or the main character. I think that's a little bit too wide for down there, but we can put that bit there and then a little bit on his feet, cut this in half and get some skinnier pieces to go down the sides. And another little bit just there. And then we can place him into position. and move the elements out of the way and place him right in the centre. He needs to be right in the centre because he's the focal character of the card. And then we want him to hold his sword, but he can actually, his sword is actually overlapping there to sort of stick over the top of his hand, but we don't want it to fall down at the bottom there. So we can put a little bit of foam tape on the back of the blade of the sword, and then we can use some wet glue to stick it to his hand. Like so. So he's got his little sword. Then, because we've done cracking Christmas, and he is a nutcracker already, but it's good to have a few walnuts on there to go with the theme as well. So we're going to stick one in the background, just flat with some glue, and tuck it behind him. I feel like it's nice to sort of add the elements touching the characters so that you're kind of making a full scene with them. And then we can add the other walnut on with a little bit of foam, like so. And then we've got 3 little bits of holly, so I definitely want to put one in his hat because I think that always looks really sweet. So we go one in the hat, and then one on the walnuts, and then we could just have one on the floor down here, or we could have it on his sword maybe. I think I like it just on the floor down there. Okay, so we're going to put that down there. Then we could have done this first, but I didn't do it. Trim off the rest of the sentiment banner. It's a little bit tough to cut through because I used 300 GSM card and there's 2 layers of it, so that's 600 to cut through. But there we go. We've got the Nutcracker card finished, and I will finish the other 2 in a similar fashion as well. So those were the 2 that we actually did in the video, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial video. Hopefully it's something that you might not have seen before or might have forgotten that you can do, or you can do this technique with your embossing folders. You just won't have the stencil to put back over the top to stop you getting the polish in the background, but doing it with a stencil you automatically have the perfect thing to place back over the top, so you only get the polish where you want it to be, rather than if it's an embossing folder and you use like the applicator from the top, inevitably you press too hard at some point and you get it in the background area. But when you do it with a stencil you'll just get the perfect pattern every time. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again in the next one. Bye!